So Callie and Megan, I think I just promoted both of you to co-hosts. So you should be able to, oops, I'm sorry, to panelists. So you should be able to unmute yourselves if you want to test that now and just see.
Sure, this is Callie.
Hi.
Hey,
Hello.
Christina, it's Megan.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you both for joining. And thanks for being patient with all of my last minute edits to everything.
No worries at all.
Were you able to show our map or no?
Yes, I did throw it on at the last minute. I put it onto our decision-making process just because it was so last second. But you know, on that slide, it still makes sense because it talks about controlling entry points and things like that.
Yep.
And at any point, if you're talking and you reference the map, I can just like jump back to that slide. So, you know, don't worry too much about that. I'll have all of the slides up and can jump around pretty easily. So
Okay, perfect.
Thank
you.
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing, Kelly. If you mention a specific thing and you know it's on one of the slides, I will either jump back to it or you can specifically ask me to pull up the slide that has, for example, the map on it or the guidelines or something like that.
Awesome. Thank you for doing that. I sent it to you very late, so.
No, these webinars come together sort of at the last minute. It's not unusual. It's really also us because we waited until so long to be able to reach out to you all. So again, I really appreciate all of you being here. It's great. Oh, and it looks like Christina just joined. Christina, I just promoted you to panelist, so you should be able to, as soon as you accept that, yeah, there you go. You should be able to mute and unmute yourself, Christina.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep. Loud and
Okay,
clear.
great. Sorry, I was trying to get my headphones set up.
No
Okay.
problem. So that means all of our panelists are here, which is fantastic. We're just going to wait a few minutes to get other folks on the line. So feel free to mute yourselves and we'll just hang out for about 10 minutes until we get started.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
For folks joining us, we have about 10 minutes until we get started. So right now you should be able to see my screen, which is the welcome screen. And just know that everyone is muted upon entry. So that way we don't get a whole lot of background noise. That is intentional. So right now you won't hear much. We're just hanging tight until right at 10 o'clock when we'll get started. If you have any questions, go ahead and chat them into the Q&A box. You can also email covid@pasofarming.org. And we have already received a few questions, but you're welcome to also send those to us at any point. Thanks so much for joining, and we'll get started here in about 10 minutes. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining PASA's COVID-19 webinar series. This week, we're talking about safe farm markets for cities. We are going to wait another about 6 minutes or so that everyone can join. We'll get started right at 10 o'clock, but know that you are muted when you come into the call, and that is intentional, but you should be able to see my screen right now if you are joining by the computer. And you can go ahead and chat questions into the Q&A. You don't need to wait, but we will hold all the questions until the end, but feel free to send them over to us. So if you have any questions about running a farm market, how to approach your city, any questions like that, feel free to go ahead and send in. And again, we'll get started here in about 5 minutes or so. So just hang tight for a few more minutes. Hi there, everyone. This is Christina Kostelecki, the Operations Director here at PASA. We'll get started in about 1 more minute, so thanks for joining. Just a couple housekeeping notes before we get started. All of these webinars are recorded and they can be found at pasafarming.org/resources. And those typically go up about a business day after the webinar. So you'll probably see this up on Monday. We'll go ahead and get started here in about another minute, but just remember that attendees are on mute just so that we don't have too much background noise and we get a nice clean recording and things like that. If you've come in using your computer, you should be able to see my screen, which is our welcome screen right now. Just hang tight for about 30 more seconds and we'll get started. Thanks so much for joining us. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining PASA Sustainable Agriculture's COVID-19 webinar series. Today, we are focusing on creating safe farm markets in cities. A few housekeeping items. Everyone is muted when they come into the call. You should be able to see my screen, and this is being recorded. You can find all of our COVID webinar series recordings at pasafarming.org/resources. And all of our information specifically related to COVID-19 is on our website at pasafarming.org/COVID-19. We keep updating resources on a regular basis, so keep heading back there as you as updates happen. We'll put them on there. We're glad that you could join us today. PASA Sustainable Agriculture supports farmers across the region, and right now, as you all know, farmers are absolutely essential. They're helping bring food to all of our tables. And immediately after the start of COVID-19 stay-at-home orders in Pennsylvania, PASA helped Governor Wolf's office clarify that markets are essential businesses and indeed should stay open. So one of the things you'll hear from all three of the speakers today, kind of again and again, is the importance of farm markets because of their ability to feed some of our most vulnerable community members during this time, and how to do that safely. So hopefully that's why you joined PASA on our webinar today, to learn how to keep markets offering safe food for everyone and how to keep them going. So that's true whether you're a city, a farm market manager, a farm vendor at one of these farm markets. And these three markets have done a fantastic job of creating guidelines and communicating to everyone their plan. So I'm excited to bring to introduce you all to our three speakers. We have Callie Bailey Silva with Farmers on the Square in Carlisle, Megan McBride with Easton Market, and Christina Howell with Bloomfield Saturday Market. So first I'm going to turn it over to Callie to talk about Farmers on the Square and some of the work that they've done.
Thanks, Christina. Hi, everybody. So I am the market manager of Farmers on the Square. We're a small producer-only market in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. The market, I think the thing I really want to emphasize as the thread throughout our story, or like the story of this time and staying open during COVID-19, is exactly what Christina said. We have just been an essential place for people to get food every week. And we have seen that both in the number of customers shopping at market, either through pre-orders and curbside pickups or in person, the number of folks using SNAP and EBT at market, and just the general feedback we've gotten from our customers and community members and our farmers. So we had a little different experience than many farmers markets in Pennsylvania in that we run a, well, let me give you a little backstory on Farmers on the Square. So we're run by a volunteer board of vendors and community members. 50% of the board is made up of vendors. And there's one paid part-time staff member who is me, the market manager. I started at the market in February, and we also, some of the really strong points of this market are we've had a very strong volunteer group of 4 to 6 volunteers who've been coming to market every week since it opened in 2009. So there's a huge amount of sort of institutional knowledge for this market. And those folks do everything from running the EBT and credit card machine, answering general questions, doing market counts, tracking and handing out our Fresh Match program, which is where we match EBT and SNAP dollars, as well as Farmers Market Nutrition Program. And we have 2 seasons. So we have an outdoor season that usually runs May through December, and then an indoor season January through April. We're a Wednesday market in the afternoon, so our normal hours are 3 to 7, and in the winter we shrink those down to 3 to 6. So like I said, like many, we were running a winter market as the coronavirus pandemic was happening. And so unlike places that had to negotiate whether to start a market at all, we were sort of already in the middle of it. And our concern was, how do we continue to operate the market as safely as possible? And who are all of the people and what are the decisions that we need to make to be able to do that? So some of the things that happened right in March were the theater closed. We normally have the winter market in our theater lobby. And obviously we were getting guidance that indoor spaces were really not safe and increased transmission. And so we run our market on the corner of Hanover and High Streets in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And it's normally a pretty busy intersection, and we have a permit both for city sidewalk space and a contract with a local church because we use some of their private property as well. So we checked in both with the church about their restrictions. Their building was closed, and they allowed us to do things like put a porta potty on the site and a hand washing station. And then we also checked in with the borough manager and the parking supervisor around, can we use some of these alleyways? We're moving outdoors sooner than usual. And then one of the things that worked in our favor and was really, I think, lucky is that the board previously had done a extended permit as part of the farmers market strategic plan. So the idea was, in a few years, the market will expand, we'll bring on more vendors. And what ended up happening is we were able to use that permit to be able to expand the market and create a lot of space in between market tents. So unlike some markets, we're not in a separate space, we're in the middle of a downtown area. And so the way that we worked to create as much safety as possible was separating vendors by at least 10 feet, but really more like 15 to 20 feet between vendors, so that we could make sure that and manage lines. So Christina's showing you the map. Normally our setup is sort of on the map numbers 1 through 12. We're just on that one corner with some, and we're definitely a lot more packed in there. And so we've expanded across to be on 3 of the 4 corners. Yeah, we have the option to extend to all 4 corners if need be, but this setup has been working well so far. Some of the ways we came to that decision were by talking with farmers and local vendors who were sitting on our board and going to our market. They were going to markets in DC and being like, the demand is really high. People, early on, the grocery stores were empty and people were really struggling to get just basic essential supplies, fresh greens, eggs, meat, bread. And then also people that had local stores were like, the demand is also really high in the Carlisle area. So our vendors were really helpful in sort of demonstrating to us, even before markets were determined by the governor to be essential, that this is an essential service. So that helped us move forward and be ready when markets were deemed essential. And I think really what happened is it was a lot of like literally every day looking at what are the new requirements coming out, who are all of the people we need to connect with and make sure that we're following the requirements for, and what are some of the safety measures that we can take, either as demonstrated by other markets that we're running in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, or just talking to other farmers market managers in Pennsylvania. So some of the safety measures that we've implemented that a lot of markets are doing, right away we asked our volunteers, many of whom are seniors and some of whom are immunocompromised, to sort of hold off on doing in-person volunteering for now. And one of the things we asked them to do instead was we decided to switch the market from using wooden tokens. So we have some vendors that don't take cash, but they do take market token, or don't take credit cards, sorry, but they take market tokens. And so we switched our debit and then our SNAP tokens, so our matching, to these coupons that you can see. And one of the things we were trying to balance is, worried about the potential of transmission and wanting things to be as contactless as possible, but also wanting people to be able to access the market. So we decided to laminate all of our coupons so that we can clean them after each market, so that it's really, I wipe them down with bleach after each market. And so trying to create as much safety as possible while balancing letting people be able to use as many payment options as possible at the market. We did some work to figure out, like, what is the minimum number of volunteers that we need to maintain social distancing well. And then had some of our longtime board members or other volunteers that weren't in a high risk category help us out with things like a curbside pickup tent that we developed. So we have started doing an online pre-order system where you can order from the market on our website and order from each vendor individually. And then our curbside volunteers will go through the market before the curbside tent opens, pick up all the pre-orders, organize them by name, and then provide contactless curbside pickup for people that are high risk or seniors. And then we had a lot of other sort of nitpicky safety things, like spacing tents out, putting cones down so that folks knew what 6 feet distancing was. We offer masks at the info tent. So one of our board members has been sewing masks and has, been really hygienic about how she's putting them together, bringing them to market. And then if people don't have masks, it's our way of saying, oh, do you need a mask? We have free masks at the info tent. I think that's been a really helpful way to get people excited and making it less about like mask compliance and forcing people to do something. And it's really tapping into the spirit of like generosity and gratefulness and excitement that people have had about being able to access food at the market. And then a lot of vendors have had to change their system. So we're not allowing tablecloths. We're asking either all of your product is in the back of the tent, or there's some sort of screen and sneeze guard in front of the product, or a table, so that customers are not touching product. The only time they're getting it is at the end of their transaction. We ask vendors to either, as much as possible, bring a second person so that someone is handling money only and someone's handling food only. And then we've had to balance that with some vendors where they're also under a lot of stress and pressure at this time, having to do things like pre-orders for multiple markets, which is increasing their market prep from like 2 hours to 15 hours. So balancing that by saying, okay, if you can only bring one person, what's your system for sanitizing after each transaction and handling product? What are the ways that you're packaging your product so that people you're lowering the risk of transmission or contamination? And then the last thing is just sort of, as the market manager, circulating throughout the market to remind people to follow our safety guidelines. So that's mostly involved not socializing, keeping 6 feet distance. A lot of vendors have been really great about putting up little signs to remind people, please don't touch food, we'll handle it for you. And I think in general, the things that we've seen are that even though foot traffic has decreased on the market, vendor sales are up, which means that people are pre-ordering and just coming to pick things up and leave quickly from the market. And people are using our pre-order and curbside pickup tent to make sure that they can still access food. We've seen the number of people using SNAP and EBT at the market double from this time last year. And so we also know that we're providing an essential service for people who are sometimes still afraid to go to the grocery store, struggling to find what they need to find at the grocery store. And in general, the feedback that we have gotten from our community has been overwhelmingly positive in terms of people sharing that we're open, people coming to shop at the market, people figuring out ways to support us with financial donations. So we're really grateful that the process was so smooth in transitioning, because I think the evidence that we've seen is that we really are essential, not just like in word, but literally we're providing food to people that need it. And there's a couple other things I didn't mention, but the borough has also, I don't think intentionally been helpful, but they've done things like automatic crosswalk signs. They've eliminated parking enforcement meters, and that's just like helped a little bit with getting people downtown in a safe way and not kind of causing crowding.
Thank you very much. All right. Megan, if you would like to talk a little bit about Easton Farmers Market and some of the things that you all have done to create a safe market.
Sure, thanks, and good morning, everybody. I've managed the Easton Farmers Market for the past 13 years, alongside the Easton Public Market, which is our indoor sister market. Both our markets are programs under the umbrella of the Greater Easton Development Partnership, and that is a 501c3 nonprofit that serves basically as an economic development arm with the city of Easton. So we are not part of the city of Easton, but we certainly receive financial support through them and other in-kind services. The Easton Farmers Market does have paid management. We do have a significant amount of volunteers, over 50 volunteers, which are a big part of everything that we do. And we do have a board that governs our process. We are a producer-only market, and we have about 35 to 40 vendors during the summer season. And then we do operate a winter market from January through April. And we were in the process of the winter market, like Callie said, when the shutdown started happening and the pandemic became a reality for all of us. And during that time, I mean, the initial reaction was a lot of panic from our farmers who had literally lost thousands of dollars in wholesale accounts overnight when the restaurants closed. And you know, we realized at that point we were reacting to the farmers' needs and you know, their need to have alternative sources for selling product. So at that point, the winter market was operating on the 2nd and 4th Saturdays, and we made the decision to go to every Saturday, and that was in mid-March. We operated our first market under the current mandated safety precautions that the governor had handed down and the Department of Ag, and everything went very well. However, we received a lot of backlash on social media following that first market, and kind of took a step back after that and decided that we were going to regroup a little bit. You know, things were changing so quickly, you know, daily, the recommendations, and there was a lot of disagreement, which was obvious, you know, through social media on whether farmers markets were actually and then food, despite the Secretary of Agriculture and our governor, you know, saying so. So we decided that we would just shift the winter market to curbside pickup only for a couple of weeks. And during that time, we would sort of regroup and figure out how we would be handling our summer market. Our winter market is located in a parking lot behind the public market. It's quite significantly smaller. It's only about 10 vendors. And our summer market is located, like Carlisle, right in our center square in the center of town. So we knew that there was no way that we were going to be able to do business as usual in Center Square because we're tightly packed in there. The space by its very nature encourages gathering. There's no defined entries into the circle or square. It's actually a circle in a square. So we knew that we had to start looking at an alternate location. As far as support from our local community and government officials, our city is a very diverse city. We're home to Lafayette College. We're also home to, you know, many high-end restaurants. We have a thriving food scene, but we're also on the edge of being designated as a food desert. We have a significant low-income population and a large amount of SNAP users, and seniors are a really big part of our market. So, you know, there was no question that our mayor and our city council would support the continuation of the farmers market. They totally view it as an essential food source, basically as an outdoor grocery store that's, you know, probably much safer than going to an actual grocery store. There are issues with transportation and access for seniors. We have a significant amount of senior housing in the downtown area. So the market really is integral to them. You know, for us, the move was really a kind of a gut-wrenching decision. We have operated in our center square for 268 years, which is a really long time. And it's not just about the historical significance of moving, but it was also about the impact that it would have on our downtown business district going forward. Part of our mission statement speaks to our obligation to help serve as an economic driver for the downtown. And on an average day at the market in the height of the summer, 69% of people spend more than $30 each at our area downtown businesses and restaurants. So it was a difficult decision. We did identify the best location as being Scott Park and Larry Holmes Drive, which is located right along our riverfront. This space was chosen because of mainly for the extensiveness of it. It was very important that we're able to space our vendors 10 feet apart, and also that we would have clear entrances and exits as how to enter the space. And a really big selling point was the fact that we had free parking, which took a little bit to wrangle that. We have a couple of large properties that were adjacent to the park space, and we worked with those property owners to actually create a lease and made sure that we were insured and covered for usage of those lots. So a big plus for us was it's the first time that our customers have ever had access to free parking. So that was obviously was a biggie. During this process and trying to secure the park, we realized, and the drive, because we actually closed down the road that fronts the park, that's Larry Holmes Drive, we had to work with the Department of Public Works and the police department to make that happen. And I can't stress enough the importance of maintaining those relationships with your local government officials, your police, your fire department, public works, so that when you need to call upon them in an instance like this, they're there for you. Our police department is extremely supportive of the market. Officers, shop the market. We have a beat cop on during market days. Things to think about are doing presentations for your city council once a year before your market starts, so they understand what it is and they can appreciate the fact that it is an essential food source, and they realize the impact that it has on the community. Doing things like police days at your market where police officers get a discount, or inviting your fire department to come and do a fundraiser at your market. Those type of things are all super important. We're fortunate, another relationship that we have is with the Easton Ambassadors, and they are a contracted clean, safe, and green team that we use in the city of Easton. They're also under the umbrella of GEDP, our parent organization, and they're able to be on site to assist us with safety, with hospitality, with keeping things clean. So that's a big piece of that. But the new space, it was challenging the first day for sure. When we opened on May 2nd, we saw long lines, we had long customer waits, we had some people that were very frustrated. I'd say the majority of people were understanding and forgiving and realized it was the first day. But we made the mistake of, we had 2 entrances and 2 exits, but how it worked out was folks had to go through 1 lane of vendors and then get in line again for a 2nd lane. And we quickly realized that we needed to spread things out more to disperse the population, but most importantly, create merge points. And we have we're lucky, our executive director is actually a city planner as well. And he asked if I knew about the Zippering Effect. And this has to do with merging in traffic. If you go on the New York Times or do a Google search, there's an October 12th article in the New York Times. It's called "Why Last Second Lane Mergers Are Good for Traffic." And basically zippering is where you have 2 lanes of traffic and people merge at the last second. And I know sometimes you may have disagreement over that when you're driving, but it actually works. And 15% of an increase in volume of cars move through when you're doing this, and there's a 50% decrease in length of lines. So merging was key for us. The other key, if you look on our map, is where anywhere locations where you see a starred point, those are possible entrances, exits to the market, and merge points. We found that it was crucial to have volunteers or staff members stationed at those points to keep things flowing. And those people are also able to identify maybe folks that aren't social distancing or are starting to cluster, gather in larger groups. So I can't stress the importance of the amount of space that you have, and having enough people to oversee that. So going into our second week of the market, we saw a complete turnaround, adding the merge points, extending the vendor spacing. And what's happened is it's just naturally dispersed customers coming through the market. We're not really even having to control the number of customers going in as we did on the first day. We had ridiculously long lines that day, and we knew that that was not something that was sustainable. As you'll see in this photo, some of our vendors also set up their own cones and traffic flow. All of our vendors are set up in a linear fashion in the same way, with their checkout the same way. All of our vendors have double tables so that there's a 6 feet space between the vendor and the customer. That's super important. We'll be maintaining that even as we go through the yellow phase. All of our safety precautions will remain in place. One of the things I don't think that we were quite prepared for was, the extensive amount of space that vendors would need, especially farmers, from shifting to a regular space where you would come in and shop within their tent or a U-shape, and going to a linear setup. They're going from maybe 2 tents to 6 tents in some cases. So, 20 feet to 60 feet really is a big jump. We do demarcate the ground with circles. We're finding that that's not quite as necessary anymore. The mask wearing, we require masks, absolutely. However, we have told our vendors that if they receive pushback, that they are not to push the issue. We are concerned about their safety should an altercation arise, but we also tell our vendors that they have the prerogative to refuse any customer that's not wearing a mask. That's up to them as a business owner. The flow is working well. Customers are appreciating it. They are, getting what they need. Because we have extended the size and the length of the market physically, we have had some pushback from older folks that there's a lot of walking involved. We have a planted median that runs the entire length of the street, which required folks to do some extra walking to get around that. So we had a local contractor build us a little footbridge, and a local resident who was kind enough to increase the walking to some extent. It was greatly appreciated. We're maintaining basically all the same types of safety protocols that Callie mentioned for Carlisle. As we head into the yellow phase, we will be allowing ready to drink beverages to come back. Right now, our coffee vendors are not allowed to sell any type of cups of beverages. We're concerned about that because of people lifting their masks to drink. So even when we do allow coffee and tea, folks will have to enjoy that in the park area and not be permitted to have that in the shopping areas. We will be bringing back crafters as we head into the yellow phase, and they will also be set up in the park area, because we really see that as a possibility for more, slow shopping, browsing situation, and we don't want that holding up the line. It is become very much of a transactional experience. Our shoppers, appreciate it, but they do try to get in and out as quickly as possible. One of the other important things I think worth mentioning in terms of vendor compliance with the rules is we did establish a legally binding vendor agreement that all our vendors had to sign, stating that they would adhere to the COVID-19 rules. So if we have anyone that is, not compliant, we do have the capacity to remove them from the market. Obviously, we would give them some notice and a couple of warnings. But, we take this very, very seriously. And, we're grateful that the new location is working and folks are enjoying the scenic location. There are some new expenses involved. We do have to rent porta potties. We're renting hand sanitizer stations each week. We are not allowing any type of ready-to-eat food at this time. I don't think we will do that until Pennsylvania enters the green phase. We just feel that ready-to-eat tends to draw a different type of customer, more of your, festival or event goer, if you will. And we want to discourage that right now and just have folks view this as a shopping experience, an essential food shopping experience. And I think it's really important that our government officials understand that that's what it is. And for a lot of our shoppers, as Callie mentioned, they're doing 80–90% of their grocery shopping at the farmers market each week. And, we're seeing average sales double what they were in previous years. Our foot traffic is lower. Normally in the summertime, we see between 3,500 and 4,000 shoppers. Right now, we're seeing between 1,000 and 2,000 shoppers. But they're hardcore shoppers and they're spending money. And it's obvious that we're meeting a need there. So going forward, we're hoping that later in the summer we may be able to bring back a few of the things that make farmers markets feel like farmers markets from a social aspect. Maybe some live music. We will not provide seating most likely throughout the summer. But yeah, we're grateful that it's working out, and we're grateful that we've found a way to pivot. And we're so thankful to the governor and the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture and the Penn State Extension and PASA. And there's been so much support out there. And for anybody that's not using those resources, I would highly suggest that the Penn State Extension offers a weekly Zoom. It's very beneficial to be able to chat with other market managers and get a better understanding of how municipalities are all dealing with this.
Thank you so much, Megan. And we actually have Brian Moyer on the line too from the Farm Market Association. So we'll make sure that he gets a chance to talk a little bit and mention that Zoom webinar again during the Q&A. So thank you. Christina Howell.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Christina Howell. I'm Executive Director of the Bloomfield Development Corporation. We serve to create a diverse and equitable community through community engagement and strive for a community where everyone can build a home, a life, and a future. I'm introducing it that way because we are an organization, a community and economic development organization first, and we started this market to further the goals of our neighborhood, which has been a delineating feature among some of the other markets in the city. I was hired in 2016 to create the farmers market and was the market manager for the first year, and have been executive director acting as director of the market for the last 5 years. So the market is, this is our 7th year, if I'm doing the math right, 6th year. I can't remember. And we also had a winter market going like the other 2 organizations who spoke to you at the time when the government shutdown and stay-home order hit. So our winter market operates outdoors December through March, and then our summer market operates May through November. We are one of the few market organizations in the southwestern Pennsylvania region that does have paid staff and significant paid staff working on our market. And because of the values and mission of our organization, we believe very strongly that we have a duty to advocate on behalf of those residents, business owners, and organizations throughout the region who have less capacity than we do. So that's kind of the preface to some of the context of some of what I'm about to get into. So we immediately, I hate the word pivot, but because everyone's using it, but we pivoted to thinking about how to create a safe market. We did cancel our last winter market and started immediately working on launching a our warm weather market as quickly as possible. We were planning to open it just as early as we could, up to 6 weeks earlier than scheduled. And that's due to demand for our SNAP matching program, where we would match, which I think a lot or most markets in Pennsylvania have, where you match every $5 in SNAP spent with $2 for free. And that has increased to a dollar for dollar match now since we opened. And then also through the demand of the vendors and farmers who had nowhere to sell their products and saw all of their income evaporate in a matter of a week. So we first tackled it as a problem of how to make a safe market and how to make it feel safe, because as the slide says, we identified it's not enough to be safe. If we are going to be successful and fully support customers, vendors, staff, volunteers, our neighborhood, et cetera, then everyone there also needs to feel safe. The perception of safety, I would argue, maybe isn't quite as important as safety, but people need to understand what you're doing and see it in practice rather than hearing the words. So our lot is a private, where our market happens is a city block wide and long parking lot, and it's fenced on all sides, which was very helpful to creating a COVID era market. However, the market is owned by the local hospital right across the street, and they were very hesitant for us to open the market there due to two factors, one of which was they were considering the possibility that they might need that parking lot, sadly, for an expansion of their triage. And then second, which is very understandable, worried about the liability and the safety of how the market would operate. So as we started looking for a new site in our neighborhood, we also started emailing the management of the hospital system once a week, which they were very open to, sending them the article from the New York Times about how we need markets more than ever right now because they're safer and they are supplying local food in a time when there is uncertainty and disruption in our national food system. So we just started sharing those things and would sprinkle in a little bit about what we were doing, not overwhelming them, just a couple of points, one article, and here's what we're thinking about this. So we reached out to the city to try to get a location of a park with a large parking lot that we could easily control the in and out of customers, and unintentionally opened a huge can of worms in the city. We know that the conversations had already begun, but that around opening the markets, which the city does run 4 markets out of around 26 in the greater Pittsburgh area, maybe it's 24. But it appears that they hadn't really considered what opening a market would mean and what the critical nature of that was. So the city said no to us on the grounds that they were not allowing any event permits on any city-owned property. And then when we tried again, they said absolutely not. No permits are being issued for anything anywhere in the city until the pandemic lifts, which, as we know, could be a long time. So we came at it again and got the Office of Equity involved, which is housed in the mayor's office. And this order was coming straight from the Department of Emergency Services, Public Works, and the mayor's office. So we engaged with local organizations, Pittsburgh Food Policy Council, Just Harvest, several others, And we worked with them to advocate and educate the city. It's clear that they were thinking of markets as events, whereas those of us who are working in markets understand the critical nature of the service we provide. And so we began working on educating and advocating. But at the same time, our hospital location decided that they wanted to support the market, so we were able to go back to our original location. Part of how we advocated for other markets throughout the city and the region is that because we have two full-time people working on the market plus a part-time market assistant, we were able to pour our capacity into the research and locating of best practices. Sorry, hold on, my screen just went blank. So we, sorry about this. Okay, so we also have a grant from Project for Public Spaces right now. We're one of 3 organizations in the United States and Canada that were awarded this year, and it's to think about how to create a system-wide strategy that supports and promotes markets in each of these cities. It's Seattle, Toronto, and Pittsburgh, and our organization is leading it for Pittsburgh. So Project for Public Spaces introduced us to AREP, which is a national planning firm, urban planning firm and architecture firm. They happen to specialize in human behavior movement modeling. Crazy, but they do. And for free, as a favor in working with Project for Public Spaces and thinking about how we could create guidelines that could be applied to any market in the United States, they helped us develop a set of guidelines. How much does one vendor space with the car, a 10 by 10, and 3 or 4 queuing locations and one shopper in front of their table take up? How wide should the moving lanes of the circulation lanes be? How wide should the queuing line be to get into the market? And where should all of these things be? How should they be arranged to maximize the number of vendors we can squeeze in that site safely and the number of customers that can move safely through? And their point at all times was that we need to control the variability of people's behavior. Think about what happens in a place if someone steps backwards, not looking behind them. Are they going to have enough room to catch themselves when they turn and see that there are people waiting behind them to shop at that vendor's tent? How do we mark and use signage to delineate what kind of things do we need to have in place to separate aisles, whether or not to use one-way aisles or two-way, whether or not to have one entrance or 2, one exit or 2. So the slide you're seeing here is their conceptual plan they delivered to us. We did refine it later, which I think is the next slide, no, never mind. That's okay. We did refine it later based on what we knew about our site and our vendors, thinking about who needed 3 queuing spaces in front of their stall versus 2, for instance. One of the other things we did to make this site plan and this market successful and safe was we increased our number of volunteers. Typically, we have anywhere between 2 and 5. Our first market, we asked for 22, and we got them with a waiting list because we just weren't sure. We had a lot of people standing around, but it made us feel better because a lot of things didn't work exactly as we wanted. The second market worked so smoothly, I didn't even have to be there, and I was able to leave at 9 o'clock. And it included, we backed it down to 8 to 10 volunteers. And one of the things I was responsible for was well, I'll back up. The market manager, Abby Gilday, who is amazing at her job, she developed the guidelines that we have shared widely across the state and across the nation to other markets and other cities. We have guidelines or rules for our vendors, guidelines for customers, and guidelines for staff and volunteers. One of the biggest things we did to manage expectations of customers is, rather than advertising the market like we normally would, rather than advertising the vendors attending, we advertised those shopping guidelines and highlighted one thing from the guidelines every couple of days, which really helped people coming in understand that they might have to wait in line, that they had to wear a mask, how they would shop, what the site plan was. So that was really helpful. The other thing we did is develop a pretty extensive volunteer orientation. It takes about 20 minutes now that we have it down. It involves things like, you know, we put together these aprons that everybody has to wear that has their volunteer tag on it, hand sanitizer, a water bottle, 3 additional masks that come pre-wrapped in plastic from our supplier, and a notepad and a pen. You know, we have taken away our tables and don't encourage people to eat or drink on site, but we realize very quickly people have to. People are diabetic, people are out in the sun, people are working like us and can't stop and eat. So we have to be able to have snacks and water and drinks, and we can't ban those from the market, but we can discourage people from consuming unless they have to, which is what we've done through our layout as well as through our guidelines. We've placed all of our beverage vendors at the very right beside of the exit, so that they get their beverages and they exit the site. So I'm checking the time here. One of the big things we did, oh, I'm sorry, with our volunteer guidelines, I sent them to the other Christina to share, because we also deal with things like training them not to take off their masks if they need to communicate with someone who has who is hearing disabled, and instead that's why they have the pen and the paper, or so they can write down notes of things they think we can improve. The masks are so that if they touch their mask, they can have a new one, or they can hand them out to anybody they see. We also give away masks to anyone using SNAP benefits at the market, and people coming in the door, even if they're wearing a mask, we offer them one. So the health department has been a great partner. They actually adopted most of our guidelines. However, they did go a step further to say that no vendors other than retail food sale vendors were allowed. And we did some significant pushback, and they then did allow prepared food as long as the food was prepared off-site. But we are, at our heart, a grocery store that actually provides a valuable service to our low-income residents by matching those SNAP benefits. And to say that a de facto outdoor grocery store can't offer other vital things to living, we felt was very exclusionary and would require our customers to go to more than one place unnecessarily. So we have pushed back against that, and we have checked into the legality of enforcement and made the decision to open up our market to non-food vendors who are selling things considered essential items, such as masks, hand sanitizer, soap, reusable cotton things for personal hygiene, you know, health and beauty products, and skincare, you know, those kind of items that are considered essential services we are allowing and continuing to advocate on behalf of other markets. The thing to note is that the health department issued these guidelines for all farmers markets in Allegheny County, but they don't run farmers markets, and they hadn't visited one that operates in this way. So we reached out before we opened and reached out again this week to ask them, not just invite, but really solidly ask them to attend our market this weekend. We've also invited city officials, elected officials, department managers, other market managers who many have attended, as well as our Zone 5 police, our local police station, to attend and observe what we're doing to hopefully make it easier for other markets. We're hoping the health department comes because I think once they see the practical application of some of these guidelines, which were very reasonable when nobody knew what to do, we think they will reevaluate. So I just want to underscore that also developing relationships with your local government and health department and officers is really, really important. You know, find a health department contact like I did and just flood them with emails, become their best friend. And then you'll get more contacts and you can find them. And ultimately, I think we all have a responsibility, if we're doing our markets well and safely, to support and lift up other markets who don't have the capacity, particularly focusing on our low income and minority communities and markets run by those populations and serving those populations. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christina, and to Callie and Megan. Christina, you all did a fantastic job of explaining your markets and how you keep folks safe. So we have a couple of questions. One for folks who are not used to farm markets and farms. What is SNAP and EBT? So this is kind of a question for any of the panelists, if you're willing to pop in here and kind of explain that.
I can do that. It's formally known as food stamps, which generally tells people they can immediately identify. EBT stands for electronic benefits transfer, and that's the card you use to pay for or pay with your SNAP benefits, which were formerly called food stamps. And SNAP stands for supplemental nutrition program, nutrition access program. It is the USDA funded program that is then funded by our states.
And several cities, counties match the SNAP or EBT benefits at farm markets, or for example, for elderly individuals. And so it's really increasing access to fresh, healthy local foods. And one of the few places that happens is at farm markets. So we're really thankful for that program. Another question that came in is, in general, what have you all experienced as the willingness of cities to change their guidance, to open things that they consider events? And this, again, is a question for any of the panelists.
I'll take that. This is Megan. You know, I think our city never really viewed the farmers market as an event, which, you know, speaks a lot to their education on a market as an essential food source. We have a lot of events in our city. A lot of our events are associated with the farmers market. Those would not be happening this year. Our organization runs PA Bacon Fest, which attracts over 100,000 people over the course of 2 days. We have a huge garlic fest. And our city immediately closed off any permitting for any type of special events, but the farmers market was never considered to be part of that. And I think it's really an important thing for government officials to note, that while it may appear as an event because you're offering live music and activities and sometimes entertainment and those types of things, at its core, it really is a grocery shopping experience for folks.
This is Christina. If I could add that, you know, our leadership at the top of our city government had a knee-jerk reaction of fear rather than open-mindedness and trying to learn, which is common because this is a scary time. Unfortunately, though, you know, once the initial order of absolutely no markets came across and no special event permits, I engaged Just Harvest and Pittsburgh Food Policy Council, and we engaged on a letter writing campaign and a petition signing, and the city announced that they would open the markets, but only to sales online, and people could only pick up in cars. If you know anything about food stamps at all or SNAP benefits, people who receive them are not allowed to shop online in the state of Pennsylvania. It is being tested in other states, but Pennsylvania is not yet one, although it is being proposed right now, and we hope it goes through. Also, additionally, a lot of low-income people can't afford to have cars, so how are they supposed to pick up their produce? So we kept pushing publicly, you know, using the press, using you know, people inside the city government who, you know, weren't necessarily in those leadership positions, but who were people responsible for managing those markets. And they did a phenomenal job of advocating inside of the city. So now the city has announced that they will be opening up actual markets that are available to everyone. So that is an exciting development that took 2 months to achieve.
Thank you. Brian, do you have anything as a perspective from working with so many different farm markets in terms of cities' willingness to work with farm markets?
Sure. I've seen, I think the most thing is that markets have a plan, and demonstrating that there is a plan in place and that this isn't made up out of your head, that these are based upon guidelines that the Department of Agriculture put out, Penn State Extension and PASA. We've done programs and created guidelines based upon those as well. And so that way, demonstrating that there is a very strategic and serious effort of keeping people safe while providing you know, these essential foods that the community needs. So I've seen markets that are able to do that, get over some fairly high hurdles, just as you know, Christina was talking about. I also want to make it clear that you know, the other thing that I think that has helped too is the weekly forums, which is just really open-ended. There's not a fixed program on it. We meet every Wednesday at 3 o'clock on Zoom. And it's just pretty much an open format where people just start asking questions or talking about how their market went that weekend based on the new setups that they had, because a lot of markets are still just opening as we go into June here. And farmers market managers in general are underpaid. You know, even the best funded organizations greatly underestimate the role that managers play and the amount of work that they have to do. And so with that, they're generally underpaid. So now really feeling for Callie and Abby, who just started managing this year, these markets, and coming full blown into a crisis and having to totally redesign. We're totally redesigning markets from what they were originally set up to be, which was a place for communities to gather, get food, communal. And now we're turning it on its head and say, no, we're going to try to move you through as quickly as possible. And they've had to do heroic work and probably double the work that they would normally have to do without any further compensation for that, I'm guessing in most cases. So I would just ask that municipalities take that in consideration, that there's a passion here for operating really successful and safe markets.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. That kind of dovetails nicely into the question here. While I understand how serving each customer, not letting them select their own food, for example, helps everyone feel safe, why are markets operating so much more controlled than the produce department of a grocery store? Again, for any of the panelists, this is definitely a theoretical question, but if any of you want to touch on that.
I think it's because we can. I think Christina said it best, but it's not just to feel safe. I mean, it's not just important to be safe, it's to feel safe. And I think right from the get-go, markets were looking at, and some are even more draconian than the examples here today. But I think it's the fact that we had the capacity to do that.
Yeah, I would add that too, that, I'm sorry, that a friend of mine who manages the Nazareth Farmers Market in Pennsylvania, she's had pointed out that, you know, farmers markets are held to a different standard because they're not necessarily viewed as an essential food source. So if there was to be an incident at a farmer's market, you know, there is a potential for a ripple effect and, you know, calling for markets to close, whereas you're not going to shut down a grocery store if an incident occurred. And I also think the other variable with a farmer's market compared to a grocery store is that you have a collective of, you know, 30, 40 individual businesses. A grocery store can mandate, you know, how they're operating, but when you have all those individual business owners, I think it's really important that the market itself, you know, is laying down the rules, so you don't have this, you know, kind of hodgepodge of rules, and that folks can really feel safe, and there's consistency in what's occurring there.
One
Yeah.
thing I would add too, this is Callie, is I think another piece of this is farmers are also really passionate about getting food to people right now. And so a lot of this is about how are we keeping both customers and farmers and their staff as safe as possible. And how do we help people feel as safe as possible too. So it's both that markets are interested in this, but also I have found, at least for our folks, that farmers are really working hard to create creative new ways to keep their customers safe, because they deeply care about the communities that they sell food in and the people who are their customers every week.
Yeah, and this is Christina. I just add, kind of echoing Megan, that when you are at a farmer's market, you have, you know, we'll have up to 35 vendors in a couple of weeks, and there's like 2 people behind each stand, so that's 70 human variables. You know, if one of those people just forgets for a minute, and it's so easy to forget, you know, as we're all slowly moving back into public space, and you're in these familiar places that you once acted a certain way for the last 6 years, it can be very easy to forget what you're supposed to do. And we have had some pushback because since we're private property, we simply don't allow anyone to step on the property without a mask. We've only had one person push back, but we have had a vendor who kept moving their mask down their face to have their nose free, and we had to tell him twice, and we were prepared to, at the end of that day, to bid him a formal and permanent farewell. But he did come and apologized and asked for one of our masks to see if it worked better, which was great because we had tried to give it to him. So anyway, because of my organization and what we do outside of the market, I think a lot about risk management. And, you know, if you come at it from that perspective, then you can see that, yes, markets are held to a higher standard, and what we do will affect our peer markets much more heavily than one grocery store, you know, messing up in some way or having an instant breakout. It won't shut down all the grocery stores in the area.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I want to, again, we're right at the top of the hour here. So I want to again thank Callie and Megan and Christina for taking your time to tell your stories and for supporting farm markets in this time when we do know that they are so essential. And for folks who are joining, you know, if you're either a farmer or a citizen or a city official, I encourage you to reach out to your city officials and invite them to come to your local market, because being there creates such a better connection, and seeing what actually happens and seeing the steps that these markets are taking are really fantastic. In terms of wrapping up this webinar, I do want to let everyone know that this is recorded and it will be out typically on Monday. It's about one business day. It'll be up on our website at pasafarming.org/resources. We'll also email it out to all of the attendees. And in that packet of email, we'll send out the slides, which include some of the live links to things, as well as a lot of the resources that these farm market managers mentioned, including the guidelines that Bloomfield Saturday Market puts out for their the training and scripts for volunteers, guidelines for vendors, all of those things will be in PDF form in the email that we send out. So thank you all again for joining. If you have any questions, you are welcome to email covid@passivefarming.org, and we'll see you again at our next COVID series. Thank you so much.